Hello, everyone. Our guests for this segment have some surprising things to tell you. They surprised me earlier about a possible new weather forecasting development. Well, I'm not going to limit it to weather because there's so many other things that this thing is capable of. You're just not going to believe, so hold on to your seat. Alan Hall is CEO of Tempus Global Data. Jim Thomas, the Claremore City Manager. Jim and Alan, welcome to both of you. I got to ask you guys, first of all, you're friends.
We are.
Goes back 20 years. How did that come to be?
Well, I'll just introduce Jim a little bit. He was a coach of a son who played football.
Really?
And Jim was a city councilor and also was at the time a city manager of Roy, Utah. So we became associated because of the coach and the son in football.
Sweet. And out of all these years, you knew this was coming, didn't you? You knew this was going to happen.
Alan was a good businessman, and he was a good mentor. He was somebody I could confide in my very early career in politics. And as a city manager, I could pick up the phone and we could go to lunch and I could get some good advice. And we've remained friends over the years. I have left Roy. I've traveled the country. I've served as a city manager in 6 other cities, but Alan has stayed grounded and true to Roy, Utah, and has raised a family and now has grandchildren in the area.
Okay, enough of the niceties. I'm going to shake your foundation. You already know that we live in tornado country. You already know of the damage and mayhem and death and destruction that we see on a regular basis here year after year. You already know about Doppler radar. You know about warning systems from the TV stations, the National Weather Service. What if I were to tell you all of that, everything you know about weather forecasting, weather events, future happenings? What if I told you that's a Model A compared to what these gentlemen are about to talk about? Well, it's the truth. Based on what I heard today, what are we into here? We're talking Star Wars.
This is mind-boggling. The technology that's been developed by some very smart scientists to give us advanced warning on any severe weather event. We can see everything in the sky with this, but when it comes to severe weather, we're going to be able to give the good people of Oklahoma many, many hours of advance notice of where that tornado will hit and actually at what time.
Now hold on here, Fred. Stop the wagon. You mean when and where it's going to hit? Mm-hmm. Did I heard that correctly?
You did hear that correctly.
I've got a phone app or 2 or 3 or 4 that hooks me up to the Weather Service and to the TV stations and all that, and I like to think I'm pretty well on top of it. But what you're saying is, what you're offering up here, in fact, makes everything I've got access to archaic.
It makes it old stuff, right? Just imagine an app now that you could have, and you'll know as soon as anybody on Earth knows where that tornado's headed and at what time, but you're going to know it way in advance. It gives you a chance to clear out, get out of harm's way, get your kids, get your grandkids out of town.
Jim, why have we got you guys here to talk about this?
Ironically, last summer I stopped in to see Alan. I was taking my daughter to college, and I asked him what the latest project was that he was working on. At the time when I was in Roy, he was owned a company called MarketStar, and I knew Alan had done very well with it, and he said, well, Jim, let me tell you, and he proceeded to tell me about this technology. And anybody that knows me knows that once you introduce a subject to me and it rolls around in my head for a while, I want to know more. And so Alan shared with me this vision he had and the relationship he had with Utah State University. And I came back to Utah in October with my wife to see her parents, and I said, Alan, I want to talk again about this. And so we talked again, and I said, we have a Oklahoma City Managers Winter Conference in Norman in January. I'd love you to come out and speak to the managers. Mm-hmm. And so Alan agreed. He came out and he spoke to the managers. During that next few months, Phil Albert And I got with Jim Bridenstine, Congressman Jim Bridenstine, and Jim is very much into space and science and technology. And we introduced this thing. And Jim, like me, Congressman Bridenstine, like me, was intrigued. And so we arranged to have dinner and shared this. And it's just opened one door after another after another. We met with some representatives from Oklahoma University. They have the National Weather Center there. And that opened up a conversation. And now Alan's back for a second visit. We have an appointment tomorrow with President David Boren and his team. We're going to tour. I've not seen the National Weather Service facility there, but it's just been a series of conversations that have opened doors and allowed conversations to take place to show people what's coming down, the Star Wars technology that you talked about at the beginning.
We have heard in this neck of the woods, the meteorologists on television, the network folks, all of them lumped together a phrase that we've become accustomed to and kind of taken for granted. Well, the models that we're watching say, and they talk about a certain computer model, but the European models say, and they give a different outlook. And common knowledge seems to be among broadcast folk and a lot of print folk that we're using outdated equipment to get the models we need because we can't afford to get to where we need to be. And yet I'm told the European model is on the verge of going away and we're going to be left with just the American model. What all will this unit do that you're talking about?
Well, Sam, let me first describe that the technology that's up there now is old. It's 30 years old, and the satellites that are in space are coming down. They only last 15 or so years, if we're lucky. So the United States government has not replaced any of them for a long time. They hope to in the future, but again, it's old technology. So think of what I mean by old. It means the satellite goes over the poles in sort of a circle effect like this. Every 12 hours for 10 minutes, it looks at the state of Oklahoma. And then it's gone for 12 hours. So the modeling that these meteorologists and the scientists have to look at is they're guessing what's going on between 12 hours. Mm-hmm. How can you be accurate with that information? The only thing that happens is you have Doppler radar, and all of a sudden you start to see some storms build up, you start to see some rain, but by then it's getting awfully late to forecast. You know what's upon you, but where is it going to hit? That's what they deal with every day. It's old technology. They're doing their very best with old tools. Now, put that aside for a minute and say this new technology actually sits up in space in what they call geo-orbit. So it's up looking down from 22,000 miles on Oklahoma and other areas as well. And every 6 minutes, it senses all the way down to the ground.
Really?
Every 6 minutes versus 12 hours. You can see the immediate improvement.
Sure.
There it is. It's looking at everything in the sky. So it sees particles, chemicals, water. It watches wind. It sees anything that's in the atmosphere. And we can see it real time every 6 minutes. So now just imagine that the meteorologists now have access to the data of these storms because we see them worldwide. We see where there's movement of hot air and cold air. We see things starting to move. The scientists are going to be able to take that data now, which is real data. They're not going to have to put it through models where they're guessing statistically anymore. It'll be real hard data, and they'll be able to say to people, that storm's going to be at 3rd Main Street tomorrow at noon.
That's scary.
That's good stuff, right?
That's the most amazing thing I've heard in many, many years. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make an assumption here. One should not expect to limit this particular technology to just weather forecasting, should one? I mean, could one not also say, well, this applies to agriculture as well?
Yes, sir. It probably applies to anything where the atmosphere affects any living being. So we're going to be able to tell farmers about their crops, when to cut, when to plant. We're going to tell transportation truckers when to move those trucks and when not to. We're going to tell people in airplanes, avoid these bumps in the air. Everything that is in the atmosphere that affects us in terms of living organisms will be identified, and we can predict ahead of time what's going to happen.
Every 6 minutes.
Every 6 minutes.
They'll get an update. So that means pardon me if I digress here, but just a moment. Everything from soil temperatures to ground level temperatures and readings and layers all the way up through the stratosphere. You're also talking about the probability of incredible water savings. You're talking about making a real serious dent in global warming through this. You're talking about incredible savings in terms of fuel and burning fossil fuels. I'm virtually slapped backwards here at what's coming.
So let me tell you how it came about. It's not my invention.
I understand.
So the United States government, back about 10 years ago, recognized that they had a problem in forecasting. They had to figure out something different. They gave Utah State University, which has a space dynamic lab, been around for about 50 years. They have all kinds of gear in space. They gave them this money with the notion that they would develop the next generation of technology. Mm-hmm. The scientists there, working countless hours with others, came up with the solutions of using infrared capabilities to look at the chemicals in the sky and any particles. They made it, they tested it, but they had to test it from the ground looking up because there was no money to put it on a spaceship to look down. Mm-hmm. But what they did by looking up is they saw the same sorts of things you would see from above anyway. So they tested it and proved it. So here we are now with a device that the government actually funded, but then the government runs out of money to move it forward to get them built and launched. So at some point in time along the way, the government said, take that technology and commercialize it. Let's let private enterprise build this versus the government.
And once it's done, even the military applications are astronomical.
Well, you can imagine our spy agencies, our military, the Navy, the Army, the Marines, everyone's going to want to see what's going on in the atmosphere.
Jim, I got to ask you, if the pairing of you two as friends, there had to be a time when you walked away from hearing this man talk and you're driving home or you're going somewhere and it hits you, holy smoke, what in the world is coming? I mean, did the enormity of that ever impact you?
It did, and you know, having lived in Oklahoma the last 3.5 years, and most recently that tornado that came through Moore in 2013, in May of 2013, I came to realize that this technology won't save property, but it'll save lives. And it will allow school superintendents to notify parents and get buses and get kids out of schools and get them home. It's going to narrow the cone. When Alan talks about this company having the ability to pinpoint, give you a date and time and accuracy of when a tornado is going to hit, or bad weather, a hurricane, or a hailstorm, that won't save property, but it'll save lives. And that is a big quality of life improvement.
It's time for me to go to a break, and I'm so sorry. I wish we had more time on this. Very quickly, give me a date. When can we expect to see this?
Our hope is this is very capital expensive. We have to raise a lot of money. Once the money's raised, it'll take 3 years before we can put them up. We'll put 6 of them up.
Oh, man, I can't wait. I just hope I'm around when it happens. Thank both of you very, very much. I'm very grateful. We'll take a short break, and we're going to come back and talk about a date that you need to be aware of, 1916. More on that right after this.